Hey, we're going live in just a couple seconds here with Neal Petersen. He is like a world-renowned, unstoppable mindset motivational speaker. He's traveled the world on a boat, and he has so many stories and motivational things. I'm so excited to interview him. Just hang out for a few seconds. We'll be right back with Never Been Promoted Live. Welcome to the Never Been Promoted podcast and YouTube channel. I'm on a mission to help you cut the time to all the things that are holding you back so you can unleash your entrepreneur. Hey, welcome to Never Been Promoted. I'm Thomas Selfrick, your host. We are live again today with a fantastically fun and awesome guest, Neal Petersen. He's overcome giant storms and all over the world on a boat. He has traveled the world speaking on motivations and how to have this unstoppable mindset. He's a big deal, and he probably spends more in maintenance on a boat than most of us make in a year. So he knows what the hell he's doing to make some cash speaking, and he's going to talk about how to get that mindset to become awesome in the world. He's joining us from an island today. And so as you guys are watching, if there's a small lag, it's not because we've not done this before. It's because he can be on an island because he chooses to, just so you know. So internet on the island. Only thing sketchier than internet on an island is probably some local governments, but we're not going to talk about that today. All right. So we're going to bring Neal here in a second. First, shameless plug time. Please, youtube.com @neverbeenpromoted. Give it a subscribe, give it a follow. And if you listen to this, take 2 seconds, do the 5-star review. It really means a lot to the community, to the guests, and to what we're trying to do to help entrepreneurs cut that tie, all that shit holding them back, so they can really unleash their entrepreneur. So enough shameless promotion. Let's bring in Mr. Neal to the stage. Neal, how are you?
Hey, great, Thomas. Great to be connecting, coming to you live from the Dominican Republic up in the mountains.
You know, it's not remote because, there's remoter places in the world, but for most people, that's pretty remote. But for you, I'm sure you're like, no, middle of the Pacific, in the storm.
Middle of the Southern Ocean, yes, coming in via satellite, or being in Haiti in the middle of a mountain where we don't even have a tower. But you know what? Today we are so interconnected. It's a luxury to disconnect.
Right. I will take that business idea offline with you later, but that is, I said, I think people will pay for a weekend of disconnection more than they will ever do anything in the future. Like a weekend where you're like required to check your phone into a box, and there's no Wi-Fi, no TVs, no technology in the place. You are only there with a book and your own thoughts. It'd be a good thing.
This is the beauty of where my wife and I have chosen to live. We built this home. We bought literally an old cow field, a degraded cow field, and it had 2 trees. It had a pine tree and it had a palm tree. And I created, over 13 years, not just a home and not just a garden, but also a lifestyle as a reward for all the travel, all the success we've been able to achieve, where, again, we had that luxury of choosing who do we spend our time with, how do we enjoy the quality of life, and how do we disconnect from an extremely busy world. And then I can just jump on a plane, and it's an hour drive to the airport, 90 minutes I'm in Miami. I can be in the middle of the hustle and bustle of whatever. But just to be able to have those options, to have those choices, that to me has become true wealth.
It is, and we're gonna get into your story for sure. You're quite like in the motivational speaking world. I mean, you're a big deal. Like you have done it. You've spoken about everywhere for governments or anywhere. Can you talk about just maybe start with the forward tense of like who you are, what you are today, and just back up, take the floor, and talk about your journey a bit of how you got there. And just find some reflective moments, but just set us up for who you are.
So I've had an incredible opportunity of being on stage for a very, very long time. Uh, we fled South Africa when I was 9 and went to England. And my mother was a political activist and she spoke at all kinds of rallies. And when I came back from that trip to South Africa, my class teacher would say, "Hey, Neil, share your stories, share your experiences of your travels in Europe with the class." And that's how I got into being a speaker. And I've been so privileged to work with some incredible corporations. IBM had me on one of their stages some years ago, 10,000 people, and it was just an amazing energy. And I was just off the stage a few minutes. We were into the book signing. People were lining up 90 minutes in line to get a signed book. And after a while, the meeting planner came up and said, "Hey, nobody's going to the next session. The people are so into what you shared that we don't know what to do. And by the way, can you be in Barcelona in 4 days' time to open up the sister conference? We're retooling that conference because my CEO wants you to open." So I've had this incredible opportunity from small stages to mega stages and to work with some of the most incredible leaders and to be able to sit at the head table and to argue about policy, to talk about the interaction of adventure and global politics and around a climate impact and what's going to be our legacy. This is hard to fathom that a boy from Cape Town who could not walk, who was born disabled, who grew up in apartheid as on the wrong side of the color line in segregation, who grew up in poverty, can now today work with world leaders, work with presidents and prime ministers of countries, work with the CEOs of big conglomerates and saying, "Here's what you got right, here's what you got wrong, here's what the future looks like, here's what you got to do to be able to create a much broader legacy that lifts all people up." And it's a privilege, it's an honor, but also comes with tremendous responsibility. And we must not forget, who do we serve?
Was that a question to me? Because we serve. I mean, that could be a loaded question. We could talk about God. We can talk to ourselves. We could talk to our kids. We serve others.
That's right.
And there's some larger concepts there. We may have to go down, but there's all those.
Yes. And so people look and say, "Wow, you became an instant success." But it took decades to get here. And it took courage to walk onto those stages and to say, "This is who I am," and to be vulnerable. And not everybody is going to like what you have to say. And I'm very honest on that stage about the things that I like and I don't like. I have absolutely no patience for disrespect. I've got no patience for people who cannot see that there's a big world and they can be a part of a bigger world versus just a small, isolated community. And I really feel that we as mankind, we can do better. And so when I stand on that stage, I feel I have a responsibility to my planet. I have a responsibility to my fellow human beings. I have a responsibility to life, to take the story of where I've come from to what can we make the world look like and who are we going to really truly pick up and serve in this world, and to use our skills, to use our experiences, our relationships, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of future generations too. So that's what I'm excited about every day. And then I get to jump off the jet, jump off the plane, come home to this incredible estate where I have a totally different life. And so we can break life into three parts: past, present, and future. And so that background of the past, growing up in apartheid South Africa, not being able to walk, laying in a hospital bed in a body cast from my ankle to my chest, and a doctor asking me, very depressed, "What are you interested in?" And I said, "Boats," because my father had been at sea as a diver. He loved the sea, but he was an alcoholic. And so he gave me the love of the sea, but taught me the responsibility of being responsible. My mother's a school teacher, and she opened up that world of be curious, to be hungry to learn, to improve yourself. And so, with that combination of two parents who basically said, you can do anything, you can be anybody, you can achieve anything you want, but you've got to be willing to work hard, you've got to be willing to sacrifice. And so, I went to the yacht club and I knocked on hulls and I asked people to take me sailing. And I got rejection after rejection. But Thomas, when you're a kid, you don't see rejection. What you see is the end result. I want to be on that boat. And that passion is so powerful that it doesn't matter what anybody else says. You keep focused on that future. You keep, oh, did we lose the connection?
No, we're good. I think the connection's solid unless we've lost it. I'm focused right now on the connection of this of the internet. We may have lost him temporarily. He may be coming back in. Oh, we'll see if he comes back in here. This is Island Life, people. So if you're listening to the podcast or watching right now, the fact that you could live on a mountain on an estate, it has luxuries, but the downside is the internet's not great. So, but when Neal gets back on here, we'll jump back in the conversation. I think one thing he's talking about, and I'll bring up here when he comes up again, I think is amazing is how he came from such meek beginnings, and he's in his story. If you go to the Neal Petersen Petersen.com, there's look at what he's accomplished in a lifetime, and what I think is, and we're going to get into here in the conversation in a little bit. His mindset of how he's done it has been truly unbelievable. So he's accomplished lots of amazing things without a financial beginning. I'm talking about your background a little bit. And so just hearing that, you came from such meek, beginnings. And for those listening, Neal just got back on from, the problems of, by the way, of wealth, right? Is not always internet works. Just want you to know that's a good problem to have. And you can choose to be like, I don't care the internet works. I don't really have to be here if I don't want to. But I said, how your meek beginnings and unstoppable mindset. But a lot of kids in your spot, just to kind of take that, without a good mindset. And it's not like, it's like you said, your dad had problems with alcohol and things, and your mom sounded like a very good influence as well. But for you, but if you always had the positive mindset, because a lot of kids in your spot give up. A lot of kids don't make it. So tell me what the difference is for you, or have you reflected enough to know those pinpointed things that this and this were really the things that I needed to do.
I think firstly, there's something that is innate. When you have not been given everything, you appreciate what you have. And today's world, people are given so much and they want it instantly. They don't have to work as hard as other generations or other socioeconomic groups. So getting things easy in a way weakens you. And then having a mother who was an educator, my mother valued education. She graduated from Syracuse University in upstate New York. She went by steamship from South Africa to Syracuse, New York to Syracuse, and graduated in 1948. She understood the value of education. And that is what she instilled in me as well, was it doesn't matter how you learn, it doesn't matter where you learn, it doesn't matter who you learn from. Most important part is you must learn, you must be hungry to look for a better world, a better life. So that was instilled at me from the beginning. And I see that in so many other folks who had so little, but they also had that strong person who encouraged them, who said, "Don't give up. No, doesn't matter how hard it is, keep getting up." And so those relationships of who you choose to be around become so critical. And I've got no time to be around those naysayers, those folks who say, "Oh, life is hard. Oh, it's somebody else's fault. It's not my fault. Somebody's taking my job." I've got no patience for that crap. And it's about, again, those folks who get up in the morning and say, yes, there's going to be challenges. And yes, I'm going to get knocked down. But guess what? I'm going to get through the day. And as a sailor, if I think about every risk I'm taking when I cut the ties to that dock line, not this tie, but that dock line tie. And I'm going to sail into that blue yonder. I'm going to encounter bad weather. I'm going to encounter fatigue. I'm going to encounter equipment failure. And I'm going to encounter things beyond my imagination. If I think of every problem I could face, I would never leave the dock. But what I have to do is I have to trust my vessel. I have to trust my skills, the skills that I honed as I've got that vessel ready, that planning, that preparation in order to achieve that execution. And then that trust that I'm going to be okay. It's sort of no matter what happens out there, I'm a survivor. I'm a winner. That's the mental side. And when that storm comes, I can't say, "Hey, storm, all stop. I'm not ready for you." I've got to shorten my sails. I've got to alter my course, batten down my hatches, and ride through it until those storm winds blow over, protect my boat, protect my life, so I can survive another day. And that is how I live every day. That's how I look at business, how I look at politics, how I look at relationships. There's always going to be a storm. How do you adapt to the environment? And then there are those most amazing moments, those sunrises or sunsets, those rainbows at sea, those landfalls. And very quickly we forget about the storms and we think, wow, look what I've just experienced. Look where I've just come from and come to the journey. And Thomas, that is why I take the risks. I calculate the risks and I say it's absolutely worth it. Every day is worth it.
Man, let me ask something. But just come back to a metaphor of sailing and leaving the dock. How many sailing trips have you been on in your life? Just estimate it.
Well, it's sort of the last 2 years ago, I did my 20th Atlantic crossing. So I've got two boats. So I've got the boat I designed and built to go racing, and I did uh, three transatlantic races solo, a bunch of full crew races, and then I did two. I entered two solo around the world yacht races. Now I
Man,
never planned to do more than one race in this boat that I built. I thought that, you know what, I'm going to become a successful sailor. I'm going to raise sponsorship and I'm going to have a big corporation and a big team because what I'm doing is I'm breaking barriers and people are going to jump on board. Well, that didn't happen. So I was given a choice. And the South African media, one of the biggest newspapers of the country, they looked at my boat, they looked at my skills when I was a 22-year-old dreaming of these races. And the yachting community nicknamed my boat the floating coffin. And the front page of the newspaper was Petersen sails floating coffin. Well, the irony is that one of my best friends today owns the newspaper. And we will do a story someday of the floating coffin along
right?
with economic and political inspiration of where that coffin took
It
me,
would be
how I
it'd be
buried my critics.
it'd be funny if they give you like a 30-year retraction. Hey, 30 years ago we rode around here, and they give you a
Yeah,
retraction on it 30 years front
yeah,
page.
but again, sort of so a lot of races, and I went up against the world's best sailors. I went up against highly sponsored multi-million-dollar campaigns. What I spent in my racing career was a suit of sails for some of the racing teams. Just one suit of sails, and they change sails halfway around the world. So two suits of sails in one round the world race was my entire career. And you
Man,
know what? That 27,000-mile round the world race, that last race, I beat some of the top sailors because I finished. Many of them sank, broke equipment, and dropped out, or just became so disheartened by the conditions they just couldn't plug through. I raced the smallest boat. I modified my boat to enter that race because that passion and the power of that dream was so strong. And I may be alone on the boat when I'm out there racing, but I also built an incredible support team of volunteers. I had to give people a reason to come and be a part of my crew, my team, to help me get to that start line. And thousands of people volunteered. Thousands of people made
crazy.
sacrifices to help me race around the world. And I was able to beat some of the top, highly funded, highly regarded sailors. because what they didn't have was the same size of heart. And I had over 1,000 beating hearts combined to get me through some of those tough days.
You have a couple themes that I notice here. One is, uh, I say this a lot. So, but it's you're 100. There's two things. One, you're 100% accountable for your success or failure. So you look at it, I think, in similar terms to how I look at it, where it's on you to be to succeed or fail. And if your mindset is one that I will succeed, then the volunteers and people get behind you on that. If your mindset is of scarcity and negativity, people aren't getting behind that, and you will probably fail, and that's going to be yours. The other is, it sounds like you do the little things great, which helps you accomplish the big things really, really well. And
Yep.
so from the metaphor of sailing, I'm not saying you have a life vest on the whole time, but you know when to put a life vest on when you're like, hey, that water looks dark up there. It might be some wind. We don't know, right? Or, oh, there's a blue whale kind of breaching near me. Maybe I'll pop it on just in case they hit my boat, right? Like whatever it is.
Well, that's not actually the problem. It's in the 1996 transatlantic race in thick fog. I got hit by a Russian freighter, and I had a huge hole in the boat, and I was sinking. And I thought, oh gee, sort of like this is over. And as I like bounced around the transom of the ship, and I called them on the radio to say, hey, all stop, you've just hit me. And the first words of the watch officer was, hold on, let me turn on my radar. They weren't even running with radar in the fog, and my radar failed to detect them. And I was given a choice at that moment, a choice to abandon the boat and climb onto the freighter. And that was a very viable choice because I was taking literally thousands of gallons of water an hour. But instead, I chose to fit a pump and to go to where that damage was and try to do the best to slow down. I couldn't stop the water coming in, but to slow down the flow of the water and then physically man the pump. And I spent pumping for 15 to 20 minutes every hour, 24 times a day. I went to that pump. My muscles were screaming at me. I was in pain. I was developing new muscles in places I didn't even know muscles existed. I did that for 15 days because I had no choice. I wasn't going to allow that boat that was my home, that was everything I owned in the world, that was part of my soul and my spirit. I was not going to allow that boat to sink. And that again is that total mindset that when you go into something, you're going to face a challenge, but are you willing to just throw your hands up and walk away? Or are you willing to fight for what truly matters? In my first around the world yacht race, very severe storm, I'm knocked down, capsized, the mast breaks. And I've got a choice. Do I continue on to Australia, almost 6,000 miles in front of me, with more storms ahead? Or do I turn around and sail back under what's called a jury rig, a piece of a mast that I could erect? Do I sail back 1,800 miles back to South Africa? If I sail back to South Africa, my critics are going to have a field day. They're going to have a field day telling me the floating coffin, look, it almost killed you. Give up. The floating coffin, you should never have been out there in the first place. And the prudent seamanship decision was to turn back, not to continue and endanger my life and possibly endanger other people's lives because I made a mistake. So you've got to be able to calculate that ego in that risk factor and say, hey, I'm going to be crucified for doing the right thing. But you know what? It's the right thing to do. And I'm going to take my licks. And this is also how you build respect. And so I got a new mast back in South Africa. It was not easy. And I had to make a hard decision. Do I now try and rejoin the fleet and basically just go around the world for the sake of now I'm going to just cruise around the world because I will never catch up to the fleet, but I'll finish the race, maybe. But then I do the calculation, the mathematics, the climatology, geography. From South Africa to Australia, Australia across the Pacific Ocean to Cape Horn. I ran those numbers. I know the average speed of my boat, so I can predict when I will get where. So I know the location of the hazards, and I laid that data on top of the climatology. What kind of weather conditions will I encounter? And I realized that I'm going to get to Cape Horn in the middle of winter, and normal conditions are hurricane force.
Nice.
And
Well,
now
you're
you
going.
ask that question. Are you suicidal, or are you calculating risk taker? And I'm not suicidal. I'm a risk taker. So the right decision: retire from the race, live, protect the asset, protect the resources, and then come back another day stronger, better prepared, and do it again. And that's how I've taken my risks in investing. I've taken my risks in building my businesses. And yeah, we all make mistakes. I've invested with people who've lost my money and cost me a lot of money. I've lost, in some cases, a lifetime of earnings to what some people make in some parts of the world. But you know what? You get up again. You take those leaks and you say, okay, I trust the wrong people. I partnered with the wrong people. I didn't pay attention to the right aspects of the market. Now, I'm not going to just stop trying to build a business. I'm going to be more selective on how much I can control versus what is outside of my control. So now, how do I improve my odds to be successful by the choices that I have to make, the data I have to process, the relationships I have to foster? And then you go back out there and you do it, and you get those home runs, and you have the successes. But then you have to ask yourself the question also: what is success?
Well, how do you
What
define it,
is
right?
success? How do you define that? And some persons just getting up in the morning and surviving the night. If I look at what's happening in Ukraine, I look at what's happening in Gaza, there are people who are not going to wake up tomorrow morning. They're going to lose everything. They're going to lose their loved ones. They may even lose their life. I look at what's happening in climate mitigation, the storms that are hitting. And I've gone through a Category 5 hurricane. And I know what it's like to be absolutely fearful of the forces of Mother Nature. We are not guaranteed to get up every morning. We're not guaranteed to see every sunset. And, you know, one day we are going to leave this planet. One day we're going to perish. We are not guaranteed life forever. But it's what we do from the time we are born to the time we take that last breath. That is what matters, is how we use our time. So to me, the most valuable commodity is my time. I can't lose time because I can't buy time. I can't trade time for somebody else. So I value my time and the people around me, their time, to maximize what is important. So part of their success is that time management and the opportunity management, and to be grateful for what you have. And then that brings you to another question. Then how much is enough? And he comes to a point in the yacht racing arena and says, every time I go out there, I take a big risk. I may not come home. I've lost 5 friends racing yachts, including my mentor. He died at sea, Harry Mitchell. That is the risk we pay with our lives when things go wrong, when we can't recover from circumstances. We just recently saw a mega storm in the Mediterranean sink a $30 million mega sailboat with a couple of billionaires on board. They had all the money in the world, but Mother Nature said, your time is up. It's over. So again, that question is, how do we say how much is enough? When do we move on to something else? And that becomes another wonderful part of the journey of life, the journey of economics, is to be grateful and to be satisfied, and to count those blessings.
So let's I mean, this is just an amazing story. Like I've never, I think I've been on a sailboat one time, and it just looked like a lot of work, to be fair. I enjoyed sitting in the front or the back of it and watching my friend do all the little things and the pulleys. And I'm like, just tell me when to duck if this thing's going to swing by. I just like, that's only I had. That was my only job, was not to get hit in the face. And I was really good at it. And I drank a lot too at that time. So that I did that really well.
A real sailor then.
I was perfect guest. But all right. But so take what you've learned, and you've been in extreme situations. And I don't think people have to have your mindset of risk quite to that level to be successful. But what I think they can learn, specifically anybody can, is give me some like a listicle, like a 1, 2, 3 on mindset, and specifically maybe to people that tend to favor, you know, what's our friend? We have a common friend in common. His name is Bruce Music.
Bruce.
He talks about this idea of, hey, this bush, this this beige rock behind this bush. For years, people had to go, is that a line? Is that a line? Is that a line? And they can never get it wrong. And so that negative kind of predisposition in the mindset is in many of us. How can you coach, or what is some advice you can give to somebody who tends to see that rock as always the lion, as opposed to it's just a rock and you don't have to worry about so much? Like, focus on more positive things. How do you help somebody who's not normally pre-wired to have a great mindset to get them there?
I think a lot of it is who you surround yourself with. And what is the environment you are in? Are you surrounded by people who are positive? Are you surrounded by dream killers? Or are you surrounded by dream makers? So those relationships are really, really important. And not just it's like who's on your crew. And if you have all the right people on your crew, then you know you're going to overcome whatever the challenges that you have to overcome. But also I look at it in terms of marriage. It is I met an incredible woman after my yacht racing career. I decided to stop racing and it was time to start thinking about that next chapter. And we started talking about that future. We started asking hard questions. What if this? What if that? Or how do we do these? What are our dreams? What are our goals? And so that partnership. And from the time Darlene and I met to the time we were married was 4.5 months. And so again, it is she could look and say, oh, here's a strange guy. Here's this guy who may just sail away. She could look for all what could go wrong versus, hey, what kind of life can I build with somebody? What can we actually accomplish together when we get into the same page? And so having that partnership, having that right communication, and then building that trust, then you don't have to worry about the lions. Because you know what? A lion comes, you put a cage around it, and you sell tickets and you call it a zoo.
That's the greatest analogy I've ever heard. If you see lions everywhere, cage it and then make money off by selling tickets.
It's an opportunity. It's an
Oh,
opportunity.
that's such a good. That's so well done.
Yeah,
I'm going to
and
steal
so
that.
again,
I hope you don't talk about that in your show. I'm going to totally steal that. I'm leveraging that. Like, if you have
and
a fear, cage it up and make some cash on it. I mean, at least you're like, yeah, it's still a fear, and you don't want to go put your hand in there, but dude, make some cash on it. I love that. That's so
yeah, and if I look at if everything had gone smoothly in my sailing career, let's say I announce I'm entering the round the world race. And everybody lines up and says, we want to be your sponsor. We want to be your shore support crew. We want you to have the best equipment. Take our stuff. And that happened. And then let's say I win the races. I'm first over the finish line. I break the records. What kind of story do I really have to stand on the stage and say, yeah, I got lucky. I got given everything and therefore I'm great? No, it was those disasters, it was those challenges, it was those uncertainties, it was those failed relationships that ended up saying, what's important? Who is important? What am I learning out here? What are the lessons?
yeah.
And am I doing this just for me or I'm doing this for the greater team that I'm a part of? I just happen to be the inspiration of that team. And
Where,
that is the story. That is what corporations pay me the big dollars to stand on their stages. And not to talk about how great I am, but what were the problems we solved to be able to move forward? How do people relate to you? How do you make people feel so that they can find the best in themselves and not be paralyzed by that uncertainty, not be paralyzed by when things go wrong, or not be paralyzed because they don't think they're good enough. And that's
yeah.
one of that imposter syndrome that some people have. They don't think they are good enough to be successful. And so it's that managing that ego and saying, my success is because I stand on the shoulders of giants. So therefore, I have to lift as many people up. I have to respect my environment. I've got to be kind to my fellow mankind. I've got to be aware of my environment and preserve and protect it, not abuse it, because we only have one world. When I'm on that boat is my world. I've got to keep the water out. I've got to keep that boat moving forward, racing it around the world. I've got to keep the systems functioning so that when I leave land, I can get back to the finish line. the next leg. Our planet is no different. This is
It,
our vessel. We've got to protect it. We've got to preserve it. We've got to understand it. And we've got to acknowledge that we are just one component in this, and that is all integrated. And there also lies the opportunity. The journey is the opportunity. And so everywhere I look, I see amazing possibilities.
you you have such a positive outlook. Take me through a story where you're like, and this is metaphor. You know, it's real for you. Where you're like, I mean, I was in the water. I thought I was dead. And now that metaphorically to an entrepreneur specifically, right? Where my company's failing. I don't have enough money. I'm about to shut. Like, it's going to feel similar, but not. But can you take me through a story where you've ended up where you're like, this is it? I mean, well, the last hope was your own hope of I'm going to swim
Yeah.
through this. I'm going to do what it is.
March 11, 1999, that sunset, the barometer was dropping, the bottom was dropping out. I was 300 miles away from Cape Horn. No competitors close by, no rescue services in reasonable distance. And the conditions were just getting worse and worse and worse as the night came on. I'm in the pitch dark, and my wind instruments go up to 80 miles an hour. And the gusts were 16 dropping down to 40, 70 dropping to 50, 80 dropping to 70. And then it was pinned at 80 and not dropping. And the sound of the wind, the noise of the wind shrieking through the rigging, I pulled all my sails down. I started dragging lines behind the boat, trying to slow the boat down because I've been blown towards the rocks of Cape Horn, the rocks of South America, because I was no longer in control. Mother Nature now had control. I was just hanging on for the ride. And the waves were getting bigger and bigger. I mean, talking monster waves. And every few minutes, my boat is being turned on its side and almost upside down. And I'm in the water. And then the boat pops back upright because the keel brings the boat back upright. And I'm still tethered. I'm still harnessed to the boat. And then it shoots like an arrow off the next wave, only to be turned on its side again. And this goes on for hour after hour after hour. I'm now hypothermic. I am just so cold. I'm now starting to have judgment questions. I'm hungry because I've not been able to eat anything because I'm hanging on for dear life. I can't go and fix a meal. I can't even go and just grab a handful of nuts just to throw down because I'm too busy holding on. And I'm wondering, am I going to die? Is this boat now going to be my floating coffin? Am I going to be another statistics lost at sea? But there's something inside of you that says, fight, hang on and fight. You've done all the preparations. You've created a good founded platform. You're doing all the right things to try and keep this together. Now, all you're going to do is survive the next 60 seconds. And you're going to turn that next 60 seconds into the next 5 minutes. And that next 5 minutes into a half an hour, into an hour. And you just got to hold it together. Hold yourself mentally together, emotionally together, physically together, and survive the storm. And you get through the storm, you're going to be okay. Just get through the next few minutes. And that's how I got through this, moment by moment.
Yeah.
All the money in the world couldn't buy me a way out at that moment. It was about my skills, it was about my planning and my preparation, and about having that strong inner faith that, yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I can die. But you know what? I'm living my dream. I'm living my life. Thomas, I was the most alive at that moment because I was valuing every second of life. I was counting every second of, hey, I'm still here. I'm still standing. And that gives you strength. And you build on that strength. And eventually, the storm will pass. You will get through it. And I did. And I got to live to tell the story. I had a girlfriend of 8 years who did not know if I'd make it or not make it. She was petrified that night ashore. She was sitting in Ireland watching the weather on her computer. She could not reach me on the boat because, again, I was being inverted so much. My satellite antenna for my satellite telephone was spending more time in the water than actually trying to reach a satellite. And I wasn't below deck to even hear the phone ring or to even call to say, hey, these are my last words. So I'm not sure if she was having a worse experience than I was actually having out there in the danger. And that also became another circumstance to another tragedy in my life. I arrive at Uruguay, ending of the third leg of the race. Gwen flies in. She helps prepare the boat. She gets everything ready. And the day before the start of the race, she says, well, I'm leaving. And I say, you mean tomorrow? And she says, no, I can't live like this. I'm leaving us. 8 years. I'd loved this woman and built a life and tried to build a future. And they on that dock, trying to have a conversation about, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I already had proposed marriage 3 times in the previous few years. And not being able to convince her and watch her walking down that dock, never to see her again. And then having to climb on that boat and go and race the last leg, knowing she'll never be on a finish line again. Those were heartbreaking moments. Those were life-threatening moments. But you know what? Surviving that, that's how I met Darlene. And 25 years later, here we are celebrating this incredible life together. We've now created this wonderful island retreat, and we are now bringing people to our home to talk about what are you going to do with your life. We create this retreat center. We take people on adventures, but more important is we challenge people to start thinking about what's important. How do you overcome these different things? How are you going to help us solve the climate issue? How are you going to look at your future of economics? How are you going to look at the political circumstances on a global level to figure out how do we bring about peace? Because at the end of the day, we all want peace. We want that environment where we feel safe, where we feel respected, where we can trust the systems around us. And so we can take our past and we can build this future by what we do in this moment of our present, this gift of our life, our experiences, our wisdom, and most important, our critical relationships.
Yeah, that is quite. I mean, and everything after that, right? Like you have like effectively the highs and lows of almost dying, seeing the one you love, and you're just inspired by life at this moment, and then they tear you down right there because they can't handle it, only to finish, finish the race somewhat hollow, probably like, oh my God, like I'm here, but there's no one here except me. So you finish it, but then you awaken a new door because there was a bigger plan for you. And if you had the wrong mindset in that moment, you may not meet Darlene. You might be like, oh, he's kind of a sad bum, whatever. He doesn't want to talk. Instead, you're like, no, I survived this. I can survive that. It's probably a good thing, by the way. You're on your third leg. It gave you a little self-reflection time, not to go tear it up in South.
Well, it's, it's, never, it's never a good time. And this is the other component. We don't control the timing of things, but what we do control is how we respond.
Yeah.
And that response, I mean, one of the greatest things that happened to me, I used to be a commercial diver in my former life. And that was part of my passion, was to be underwater. And I worked on oil rigs. I worked on dive support ships in the middle of nowhere on difficult missions. I mined diamonds on the ocean floor, the only deep water mine in the world. And I worked with some great people and I worked with some tremendous jerks. And we stuck on a ship together. And you stuck with people you don't like, you don't respect. You got to learn how to get along. You got to figure it out because there's nowhere to escape to. And you got to celebrate and cherish those that you enjoy being around and working with. And then one day, there was an accident. And I knew my career was going to be over. Uh, it was, I got a type 2 bend. And also, so another time was I got downsized. We were working at this mining operation and we weren't making any money. And they ended up shutting down the company. And I was out of a job. And so here I am at a crossroad in life of, okay, I can go and find another job, but now I've got this risk of I could get the Benz again much quicker. Or I can take that passion and I can transfer it to go and build my own company, to go and build my own venture. And by losing that job and losing that ability to dive, that opened up a whole new set of opportunities. I was able to focus next building my boat. And when I started to build my boat, I didn't have the money to finish the boat, but I had the faith that I would find a way to finish the boat. And there were lots of things that I wanted, but I couldn't afford it. But I focused on what do I actually need. And knowing between a want and a need is really, really critical in business. I need a mast. I need a sound hull. I need a good keel, a good rudder. I need some sails. I would want some nice electronics. I would want some wonderful, fancy telecommunications. I'd love to have the next level of systems. That's a want. That's not a need. And so many people are so hooked in what they want that they ignore the needs. And they think, oh, well, if I can't have this, then I won't have anything. That's part of that, what I look at as that poverty mindset of focus on how do you start. Don't worry about what's going to go wrong. Be aware things are going to go wrong. Don't be stupid. Don't be blind. Don't be uncalculating. But know what the needs are and know who's in the relationships to help fulfill those needs and how are you fulfilling their needs. Give the people a reason to want to be your customer. Give people a reason to want to partner with you. And that is an attitude. That is an incredible tool in the business arena. And you'll find those wonderful moments that where the company will start to move along, where the success starts to come. And then that willingness to keep learning, but always learning to say, how do I solve somebody else's problem? When I stand on that stage, it's not about telling my story. It's about using my story to help solve a problem of that organization, that corporation, or that government, and those attendees, those people sitting in the audience. They all are trying to figure out how do they keep the food on their table? How do they keep their kids safe? How do they have a dignified life? How do they find the people to support them? So this is our job, is to help them find those tools and to encourage them and to say, yeah, you don't have to be a racing sailor. You don't have to be a big name speaker. Just be a good, kind human being. Build the solid relationships built on integrity, relationships built on trust, relationships built on respect. And when you've got that foundation, then you can start to build the rest of the stuff that's going to become your legacy. That's going to become what you look back and say, wow, look where we've come from.
It's amazing. It's an amazing story. Looking to the future, what's next for you? What's your
there's a lot of things.
What's your next adventure? I should say it that way.
There's a lot of things going on right now. I'm looking at the implications of climate because as a sailor, I've seen the climate changing on me. There are certain yacht races that I've done repeatedly, and I won those yacht races because I was able to find the currents. The currents were fairly stable. Now those currents have broken down. I'm seeing it firsthand. I just came across 2 years ago. I just came across Atlantic with my best friend on our big catamaran, and the Sargasso Sea, which is 600 miles to the east of the Caribbean chain, and it is once you pass through the Sargasso Sea and you approach the Caribbean chain, the Sargasso should become spotty. And some years before, I'd been all the way across to Colombia because we were going to actually take the boat into the Pacific Ocean and cross the Pacific Ocean. But the Sargasso went all the way to Colombia and nearly to Panama. The Sargasso Sea has lost one of the currents that contains the sea, and the currents are moving across. And so I'm seeing these changes. In 2018, we got hit in Puerto Rico by two major hurricanes. The Irma came through and damaged my boat. I flew in a few days behind Irma, and the day I landed and got into my boat, Hurricane Maria was born. And I ended up going through Hurricane Maria, two back-to-back Category 5 hurricanes. So I'm seeing many different things. Darling and I have been traveling around the world, and we're talking to farmers, we're talking to local folks, we're talking to scientists, and they're saying our world is changing. So I'm looking at the data. I'm looking at the historics. And so I'm very concerned about this legacy, and I'm very concerned about people who are denying, saying, "Oh well, it always changes. Oh well, there's nothing I can do." Yes, things do change, but not at the rate that they are changing. And so we have to start really looking at how we live our lives, the choices we make, how we consume, how we consume technology, how we consume raw material. So this estate that I've created, I've planted a vast collection of bamboos to say, how can we use bamboo to mitigate some of this climate impact? I have scientists who come to my garden and saying, okay, we see what you're doing in the garden. Now, how can we scale that into other gardens so that people who have a home and feel that they want to do something, what are the choices they can make? So I've created the test bed. We bring various young people through various programs that we run, a workaway program where we get volunteers who come and help build things and create things. And we have vacation rental folks who come because we've created a sustainable environment to nurture them. We're bringing people together, not just to have a good time, not just to laugh, but also say, how can we make a better world? How can we combine our synergies and take away some knowledge and do small things? Let's be mindful. And I'm never going to finish this job because there's always going to be people who want to be a part of this journey. There's always going to be folks who want to come and have this one-on-one, very intimate retreat. Some are individuals, some are couples. But again, it is people coming together and having a common vision, having a common understanding to say, we can do better. We can create a better world. And we want to scale that into the political arena and talk to political leaders. I've had the privilege of working with the National League of Cities, where I've worked with some incredible mayors and city councillors who've just done phenomenal work around the world and in the United States. I've met governors, I've met presidents and prime ministers of countries. There are a lot of good people out there who want to do the right thing. But we've got to change some of the systems that prevent them from doing the right thing. We've got to come back to honesty. We've got to come back to those core values of integrity and be our brother's keeper to lift people up. And so, how do we build those, foster those relationships and their cooperation? Those are the things that keep me up at night. We we spend so much money on warfare. Again, I'm looking at the data of all the bombs between Russia and Ukraine, all the bombs going off in that theater. I'm looking at all the bombing that's taking place in Gaza. And then I'm looking at what is going to cost to rebuild, the cost of human life and the cost to rebuild. We talk about carbon impact, and yet our walls are creating the worst carbon negative impact for future generations. So we got to really look at how these things go. Some years ago, I didn't go into the Pacific Ocean because I had opportunity to go and work with this incredible company in Canada, Infotech Research Group, where I got to help train their scientists, their PhDs, to stand on the stage and do what I do on the stage very well, to be comfortable on the stage. But I got to build a relationship with some amazing, super smart technology leaders, and we've got to talk about these problems. We've got to talk about how is technology helping us, but also how is it hurting us. Look, here you and I'm sitting in the Dominican Republic, you're in Atlanta. You've got over 1 million subscribers. We are connected through technology. We can share our ideas. We can find ways to be our best selves utilizing technology. But then on the other side, we've got these folks who are using technology for pure escapism, who sort of are being dumbed down. They're not using it to lift themselves up, or they're using technology to tear somebody else down by sowing misinformation, by sowing seeds of doubt. We can't blame the tool. We have to look at the user.
Yeah, no doubt.
And how do we do things to do things better? This comes back down to curiosity. This comes back to how are we brought up and how are we held accountable and responsible? What are our ethics? What are our values? And when we can use technology in a positive way to address these issues, and instead of people sitting there and looking for the thumbs up and the likes because their self esteem has been trashed, they've been led to believe that the only way to be successful is through consumption versus what makes a good human being. How do we address these self esteem issues? How do we address these political issues and say, look, what is noise and what is really important? What is sort of the things that you are doing that's going to help your community? And then how do we hold leaders accountable? And when they step out of line, we deal with them. We remove them from power. We remove them from the place of economics. I look very carefully at how I consume, how I spend my resources. I'm not going to spend it with somebody who doesn't share my same values.
Yeah. One idea for the politicians that lie is kind of goes back to a lawyer joke. Like, what do you call 10,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. And so what you can do is just take them sailing, and maybe they come back with you, maybe they don't.
Yeah, but I hate to pollute the ocean. I hate
Right.
to
Well,
give
that was you don't want to be you don't want to contribute to the storms. Neal, thank you so much for coming on today. Is the best way for someone who wants to maybe hire you to speak or work with you or do something, you look at these retreats, just to go to the nealpetersen.com? Is that the
Yep.
best way for you?
Yep.
Is there anybody particular?
Our email is all over online. Just reach out. You're going to get a response from Darlene. She always responds within 24 hours if we are not sailing.
Right.
We are going to be on the boat from time to time, but we do put a notice out that, hey, we're not going to be available for a little bit. But it's all about planning. And it is utilizing, again, there's these platforms. We can do things virtually as well. Or I like in person. I love those in-person relationships where you really get to 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 hold somebody's hand and feel it sweaty. To say, hey, here's a shovel. Let's go to the garden. Let's go and dig a trench because we're going to do something here positive, something physical. But we're also going to talk about your life and what are you digging for? What are you building with what you're digging up? And so there are lots of ways we can engage people. But you know what? It's about people have to show up. You
That's right.
can't succeed if you don't take that first step. You can't succeed if you don't show up and say, what can I be a part of?
It sounds like you are very much so comfortable building, the metaphor of a planting some trees in life that you have no intention of ever seeing get to produce fruit, that somebody else is going to. And I think, the idea and the metaphor of your garden and the things you're trying to do with climate, you're trying to affect change for a few generations from now. And I think when you get to that part of your life where you're doing that, it's a probably amazing feeling. I'm not there yet. I hope to graduate there one day, but I can see that in you. And I think anybody who's aspiring to be more, feel more, be more, that I think that's your kind of that's your true north, right? Is if you can
Yeah.
do some things for the world that you have no intention of benefiting from because you can't.
Yeah.
It's just too far out.
And it's doing work for an unborn generation and being able to say that yes, this is important and prioritize and to start looking at our actions and asking a question, is this action in the best of interest? I mean, I've had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time on private jets, but I'm not going to go and fly on a private jet just because I want to stroke my ego. If I have to jump on a jet, it's because there is a major problem that we have to be a part of solving, and it's time critical. It's got to be done now for some reason. And so, whatever that cost is, the benefit to our society has to be way, way bigger than the abuses or the privileges that could be had. So, it's how do we live a mindful life? How do we look at those little things and really say, is this necessary? Is this relevant? Is this important? And not sweating the immaterial small stuff and being able to like get beyond those issues. I mean, my wife and I always are looking and saying, how do we work together? How do we solve these things? How do we support each other? Because by supporting each other, we support a broader community. And that to us is what life is about.
Love it. Neal, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time and just even our time off camera too. I truly heartfelt mean that. So thank you.
Our pleasure.
I'm going to put you in the periwinkle room. There's no garden or anything back there. It's just digital. So I'll be right back with you though. But thank you so much, Neal. And for everyone who made it this far in the show, listen, Neal, his story is amazing. Like we like literally, scratched not even the surface of kind of what he's done in his life and what he's doing. So thank you, Neal, once again for coming on. Let's get out there, find the things that are kind of holding you back to become bigger, better, just even beyond entrepreneurship. Cut those ties and become a new self, a new version of yourself, and do better. And I know I struggle with it. I know I'm trying to, every time I meet somebody, learn something from them, they become better, do better. Sure, you make mistakes, you go backwards at times too, but you just got to, pick it up, keep grinding out. And kind of like the story Neal said of, it's just wave by wave, the rise, the fall, the flip, the turn, just hold on, accept the ride. And at some point the waters become calm when the winds die down. So once the winds die down, you can maybe take control again and head in a direction, but survive it. Thank you so much for listening. Until we meet again, please get out there and go unleash your entrepreneur. Thanks for listening.